Some of you aren't going to like what I have to say, but the Olympics are terrible for the planet. The Milano-Cortina 2026 Winter Olympic Games ended yesterday, and today we're going to talk about whether these major sporting events that happen every 4 years or so are worth it in a climate crisis world. The planet is burning down. Can we afford to keep hosting Olympic Games? Hi, my name is Karishma Climate Girl, and here we talk about nature, planet Earth, and all of the wonderful creatures, including you and me, that live on it. We're talking climate and sustainability in a way that isn't blind to all of the beauty that surrounds us. I first started pondering the question of the environmental impact of the Olympics when I heard that PFAs were banned in this year's 2026 Winter Olympics for skiers and snowboarders. There's a common practice of applying a fluoro wax to the bottom of your skis or snowboards to give you a really ridiculous speed advantage, to quote a former US cross-country skier. The problem is that these waxes contain substances called PFAs, which are per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances. Try saying that one 3 times over. PFAs are the big bad guys of synthetic chemical compounds because they are notorious for never breaking down, and scientists and health advocates have linked them to a whole laundry list of health issues, including cancer, thyroid disease, reproductive hormone issues, and more. So what ends up happening when these winter athletes use these fluoro waxes on their equipment and then go up on the mountain is that it contaminates the snow. And of course, when it contaminates the snow, it percolates down into the drinking water of the villages and towns that surround the ski village. This happened in Park City, Utah, which is very close to a popular ski hill, is that they found traces of PFAs in their aquifer. So, to protect the water and the people living in the quaint little town of Cortina, the Olympics for the first time banned ski waxes containing PFAs. And I thought, hell yeah, what an environmental win for the Olympics. This is a good news story. I also heard that the metals they were using at the Milano-Cortina Olympics are made of recycled gold, silver, and bronze, which is also great news. Good on you, Italy. But then I went farther down the rabbit hole, which as an environmentalist is almost always a bad idea. These Olympics were unique because they were hosted by 2 cities, Milan and Cortina. Cortina being a really quaint, small village in the Dolomites. It is not really adapted to thousands of tourists descending upon the town at the same time, and it doesn't have the infrastructure for high-performance winter sports. All of that needed to be built out. I learned that a prominent environmentalist in the area named Luigi Casanova has been advocating against the paving over, pouring cement over this beautiful town in the Dolomites since they announced that the 2026 Olympic Games would be held in Cortina. Side note, I've been a big fan of men named Luigi since December 2023. I don't know about you. He especially had a problem with the bobsled track because to build this bobsled track, they had to cut down hundreds of larch trees that were from 150 to 200 years old. These are giant, beautiful trees that have lived through the world wars, all coming down for a bobsled track that's going to be used by a few athletes for a few days and then abandoned forever? To quote Luigi Casanova, "Soldiers who fought here had the sensitivity to conserve this extraordinary heritage, but they couldn't survive the vandals of 2025. He also put together a beautiful, harrowing, artful form of protest by partnering up with famous Italian cellist Mario Brunello, who played the cello on the day the chainsaws arrived to cut down these larch trees as if to play a requiem for them as they were put to death. Take a look. That got me thinking, are there other stories like Cortina? Are there other Olympic villages that were built up for the Games but then abandoned after the Games had left? What does it mean to host the Olympic Games? Does it live up to its promise of this injection of economic prosperity and jobs and brand new infrastructure and better transit? Or is that a lie that's sold to their citizens and to tourists and athletes? So let's look at a case study of what happened in Rio in 2016. When researching the Rio 2016 Summer Olympics, I learned the term white elephant. Time for some history, a microdose of history, myth, and legend. This is a story often told in Thailand about the king of Siam. Siam, of course, was what Thailand used to be known as. The king of Siam used to gift white elephants to his enemies or to anybody who displeased his highness, because white elephants were so expensive to take care of and maintain that they would then cause financial ruin to whoever was gifted one. Today, the term white elephant is almost exclusively used to refer to Olympic venues. Think giant velodromes or fancy aquatic centers that are built for the Olympics at an Olympic village. And once the Olympics are over, those venues prove so expensive to maintain that they're just left to ruin. They are abandoned. At the time when Rio won the bid for hosting the 2016 Summer Games, the mayor of Rio promised no white elephants when it came to building out his Olympic village. But that's not what happened. There's a whole herd of white elephants in Rio. When they built the extraordinary Arena of the Future to host some of the sporting events, they promised that after the Olympics, it would be dismantled to build 4 new schools. That never happened. The venue is still standing and not being used. The aquatic center, abandoned. They tried setting up a Olympic Legacy Governance Authority, which was a body of people responsible for making sure that the infrastructure put up for the Rio 2016 Games was utilized in a way that's useful to society after the Games ended. But in 2019, President Jair Bolsonaro dissolved this committee. Now keep in mind, Bolsonaro was the kind of president under whom the Amazon rainforest almost collapsed. So are we surprised? And let's not forget that they displaced 650 families to build the Olympic Village because they were living in a place that was blocking road access to the park. They offered these residents either financial compensation or to move them into a condo not too far from where they lived. However, the community that they were destroying, the community that these people were a part of, was a favela, which, if you know anything about Brazil, these communities are the very fabric of Rio's culture. So for the people that said, no, we don't want to leave, generations of our family have lived here, this is our home, the government didn't shy away from using, and I quote, physical violence, threats, and psychological pressure. They basically forced these people out by suspending municipal services like garbage collection, mail delivery, and even street lamps. All for what? For their home to be filled with this herd of white elephants, these dilapidated, decrepit Olympic venues that sit gathering dust. So it begs the question, is hosting the Olympic Games a net positive for the communities upon which the Olympics descend? And since we're talking about people, let's talk about planet too. In my opinion, from my research, the Olympic Games that by far caused the most environmental harm and damage were the 2014 Winter Olympic Games hosted in Sochi, Russia. Tell me why I didn't know that Sochi was a national park. They hosted the Winter Olympic Games inside a national park. In fact, Sochi National Park contains the greatest species diversity of anywhere in Russia and is designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. They tore this place down to make an Olympic Village. In the lead up to 2014, the Russian government did a bunch of shady things to speed up the construction of the Olympic Winter Village. One, the mandatory environmental assessment that's needed before doing things like this was thrown out the window, which I guess we're doing in Canada now too. Shout out Mark Carney. Shout out Doug Ford. And two, they changed up their own forest code to now allow the logging of rare species of trees and shrubs. In fact, there are ancient migration routes used by bears and ibex in Sochi National Park in the Abga mountain range that were destroyed to build the Olympic Village. Not to mention, they cracked down hard on environmental activists like Luigi Casanova over in Italy that were protesting this, but this is Russia. The consequences were way higher. I'm gonna name these people. Let's put some respect on their names. Surin Gazarian was a member of the Environmental Watch of the Northern Caucasus. He was forced to flee from the country and seek political asylum in the EU. And another activist and journalist named Evgeny Vitishko, he served 3 years in prison for protesting the environmental destruction brought on by the Sochi Olympic Games. More than 7 other people were arrested. Okay, so we've talked about how the Olympic Games aren't so great for their host cities. Communities and ecologies that exist in the area seem to suffer every time. But do the Olympic Games harm the planet as a whole? This is where I'm going to talk about the fossil fuel sponsorship of the Olympic Games and Olympic athletes. In most countries around the world, athletics are underfunded. And wherever something that the general population loves is underfunded, is an opportunity for oil companies to come in and save the day. I'm Canadian, so let me give you a Canadian example. Petro-Canada, which is owned by Suncor, is one of our biggest oil and gas companies here in Canada, and they're also one of the biggest sponsors of the COC, the Canadian Olympic Committee. Why, you might ask, why do oil and gas companies get involved with funding athletics? It's to clean up their image, right? By now, most people know that oil and gas companies are responsible for the destruction of our entire atmosphere and climate. So by funding arts and athletics, they're trying to distract you and they're trying to curry your favor. They're trying to say, don't look at all this harm we do. Don't look at the fact that we are actively destroying your children and grandchildren's future. We're destroying the entire planet. Look at the fact that we're funding your favorite athletes. Look at the fact that all these gold, silver, and bronze medals are because we provided these athletes with the facilities and the training they needed to achieve their best. In fact, the official sponsor of the Milano-Cortina 2026 Winter Olympic Games is is Eni, Italy's largest oil company. If you think about it, fossil fuel sponsorship of the Winter Olympic Games in particular is a huge contradiction. Burning fossil fuels causes global warming, which is causing our ice caps to melt. In fact, here in Canada, we are at risk of losing our winters. Canada is warming 3 times faster than the rest of the world. So how ironic is it for Petro-Canada that is directly responsible for the fact that our glaciers are melting, we're losing our snowpacks, our ice is melting earlier, our winters just aren't as cold? How ironic is it that they are in charge of sponsoring our winter athletes that can perform their best only when mountains have a healthy amount of snowpacks on ice? They depend on winter, and Petro-Canada is actively robbing us of our winter. Greenpeace made an excellent video highlighting the irony of fossil fuel sponsorship at the Winter Olympic Games. I really encourage you to go watch the whole thing. I'll link it in the description. In fact, more than 440 athletes representing over 90 countries that compete in both the Summer and Winter Olympic Games are calling on the International Olympic Committee to ban fossil fuel sponsorship. That's how the Olympics affect all of us from an environmental perspective, because if these fossil fuel companies get more of a social license to operate from athletic sponsorships, they burn more fossil fuels and they bring all of us closer to a melting, warming world. I also really quickly want to touch on the fact that the Milano-Cortina 2026 Olympic Games promoted the use of generative AI. I'll make a caveat here. I have a problem with the use of generative AI, especially when it comes to creating art, which they did use during the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympic Games this year. They used a AI-generated video highlighting the history of the Olympic Games. It was a whole montage, truly AI slop, which is also really ironic because there was another part of the opening ceremony, which was a celebration of Italy's rich heritage and cultural endowment when it came to art and artists. Think Da Vinci, Raphael, Botticelli. And this entire sequence in the opening ceremony was entirely human-made, performed by real-life people. So the AI slop didn't really have a place in the opening ceremony, but I will say I heard about some more useful employment of AI during the Olympics themselves. Omega is the company that provides the stopwatches and the cameras that are used in the Olympic Games. By cameras, I don't mean the ones for journalism, I mean the ones for actually assessing the athlete. It allows the system to really accurately measure things like blade angle, jump height, and air time, which I think is cool. Okay, so we've talked about some case studies, we've talked about some anecdotes, but let's do the math. Overall, are the Olympic Games, summer or winter, good or bad or neutral for the planet? Luckily, there's a study in Nature Sustainability that does exactly this. They looked at the Olympic Games all the way from 1992 to 2020, summer and winter, and rated them on different aspects of sustainability. Some of the metrics they used to assess the sustainability of the Olympic Games included things like, long-term viability of venues, are there any white elephants, and social safety, displacing the local population, how is that being done? And if we look at their overall analysis, it is a clear downward trend. The 2010 Winter Olympic Games in Vancouver were the first to be proclaimed, self-proclaimed, I should say, as sustainable. Yet, the Olympics held before Vancouver 2010 were all more sustainable than the ones held Vancouver onwards. So now we know that anecdotally and statistically, the Olympic Games are terrible for people and the planet. But what about the intangible social good that's brought about by sports? What about the fact that sports, like arts, are like a global language that transcends borders and culture and allegiances? Sports, in fact, sometimes shape culture. So I present you with 4 rapid-fire reasons why sports are a net positive for society. Number 1, when people are engaging in sports, they're not engaging in consumption. Sports are a hobby. The more time you spend perfecting that double axel, the less time you're spending scrolling on Amazon, spending your hard-earned money on useless plastic garbage that's terrible for the planet. Sports fills your life with something rewarding without costing the planet. 2, sports bring people together, builds community, especially team sports. In a climate crisis world that has gone hyper-individualistic, people crave community more than anything. Sports are a great way to meet new people and make new friends. There are some legendary examples of sports bringing people together. Have we forgotten the famous Christmas truce of World War I, where British and German soldiers lay down their arms for just a moment to have a game of soccer, of football, on no man's land? Or my fellow Desis watching this, the entire plot of Lagan. Set in British India, a group of villagers challenged the British imperialists to a game of cricket as a way to protest the colonial tax laws that oppressed them. Even if you don't play sports, you're telling me this performance didn't bring people together? That this isn't a form of expression in and of itself that makes people feel things? Number 3, sports keep people healthy. Getting your blood pumping leads to better cardiovascular health and better mental health. And this isn't groundbreaking, this isn't anything new. But this links back to climate because healthy people have a smaller impact on the planet. Fewer resources are needed to service their medical needs because let's not forget, everything comes from planet Earth, including the material needed to create medical equipment and medication. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't put resources towards these things. I'm just saying that healthy people are good for the planet, and a healthy planet is good for people. Number 4, sports force people to touch grass. Most sports are played outside, and the more time you spend outside, the more you grow to love the outside, and the more likely you are to become a steward of the outside. That's why there are 440 athletes on that letter trying to protect the beautiful arena of planet Earth in which they compete. So yes, I think we need to keep having and hosting Olympics. They are a net good for society, but I think the way we go about it can be changed up. How can we make the Olympics truly more environmentally friendly? Now, I'm no policy expert, but I can throw ideas out there. Like, hey, maybe make it mandatory for host countries to submit a plan for what happens with infrastructure after the Olympics are over, and punitive measures if those plans aren't followed. If you create an Olympic ghost town after hosting the Games, we won't let you host the Games again. And perhaps the IOC says we won't let you host the Olympic Games if you're actively building in protected areas for the Olympics. And maybe we can ban fossil fuel advertising. There are lots of ideas, but I wanted to end this video on a success story about how activism and organizing led to change the Olympics for the better. In 1988, Calgary hosted the Winter Olympic Games, and these were the first Olympic Games free of tobacco advertising. Before this, tobacco companies would sponsor athletes in the same way that fossil fuel companies sponsor athletes today. Take a look at these posters. Camels, a cigarette brand, don't get your wind. Now, this is an Olympic high diving champion. And how about this guy? Kent is my favorite too. He's an Olympic 400-meter sprint champion. And then the last one, athletes relax with the smooth taste of Lucky Brand cigarettes. Tobacco sponsorship of high-performance athletes just didn't make sense. Athletes need to be in excellent health to perform at their best, and smoking is terrible for your body. The campaign that led up to the ban of tobacco advertising at the Calgary Games was actually led by a Canadian. Oil companies sponsoring a snow-covered mountaintop makes just about as much sense as a box of cigarettes sponsoring athletes that have some of the best lung capacity in the world. So there you have it. We can make a change. But what do you think? Do you think we should keep hosting the Olympics in a climate crisis world? How do you think the Olympics should change? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this video. Bye!